Hi, this is Barrie, and welcome to the Audiowavecafe podcast. On this episode, my guest is Ruth Cherrington, author of The Dirty Stop-Outs Guide to 1970s Coventry. First, I talk about Is Old Music Killing New Music? Later, I'll be shining a spotlight on the Rockhouse, Coventry's much-missed Tiffany's. The podcast ends with a demo of an original song of mine titled Times of Our Lives. If you have any questions or comments about the podcast, email me at audiowavecafe@gmail.com and I'll get back to you. I came across a YouTube video by Rick Beato, a popular musician and producer with over 2.5 million subscribers. He was talking about is old music killing new music? It's something I've thought about for some time. I believe there is good music being written and recorded by young musicians, and that's always been the case. These days you can record your songs with quality recording equipment that doesn't cost a lot, and stick it on YouTube for free. But as regards to getting a recording deal, well, major record companies have to keep their investors happy, and nurturing new talent is not such a priority when you can buy up whole song catalogues with a ready return on your investment. And it's investment companies that have joined forces with major labels such as Warner, Universal and Sony that have been snapping up song catalogues. Bruce Springsteen sold his entire catalogue recently for $500 million. The Spirit Music Group has a song catalogue of over 100,000 songs, which also includes the Who's song catalogue, and is owned by Lyric Capital Group. It's a private equity firm. Oh, and it also acquired a Premier Music catalogue for $130 million. Do you think they care about nurturing new talent? In the UK, Elton John, Queen and Fleetwood Mac were among the biggest selling artists in 2021. And on iTunes US Top 10 Albums chart in January 2022, you would have found albums by Jethro Tull and Neil Young. On a local level, look at the number of live music venues that consistently book tribute acts. And there are a lot of acts to choose from. It's not just Elvis, ABBA and Beatles tribute acts. There are acts that cover a particular decade, like the 70s, 80s and 90s. There's a varied choice in genres too, where a music venue can take their pick from pop, rock and ska. It's never been easy for artists and bands playing original material to find work. It used to be that working men's clubs in Coventry and Warwickshire refused to book acts that only played original material. I've played in a couple of bands whose song repertoire was designed to cater to clubs. Yeah, gigs were frequent, 3, 4, 5 nights a week, and the money was good. But for me, I got the most satisfaction from playing original songs in a small, smoky pub for not much money. Oh, and I don't think there were many capital investment company execs in the audience either, just looking for new talent. Today I have with me Ruth Cherrington. She's worked as a higher education lecturer and trainer, a consultant and a presenter on radio and TV. She's also the author of a trilogy of books in the Dirty Stop-Out series, dealing with Coventry's nighttime culture. And we're going to talk about the first book, titled 1970s Coventry. Ruth, it's a pleasure having you join me on this call.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
What motivated you to write the book?
Many things, actually. I've been thinking for a long time that there was a lot going on in my hometown, of which I'm very proud of, by the way, and that a lot of it just didn't get documented. A lot of the history of popular culture, especially what people were doing, their ordinary lives, how they lived their lives, how they enjoyed themselves, it wasn't really wrote about very much. And I thought it's something needs to be done. So I did make some inroads into righting that wrong, let's say, when I started researching and writing about working men's clubs, because growing up in Coventry, working men's clubs were at the centre of my family's social life, and that was the case for many, many thousands of people right across the city. So I spent years in my spare time researching, reading about working men's clubs, talking with people, and I did intend to write a book about Coventry working men's clubs. I did eventually, but before that I wrote about the working men's club movement, because when you're a writer, you start off with one idea and things tend to snowball. So I'd already started writing about Coventry and done a few blogs about where I grew up, Canley, and as an out of town post war estate. And I got quite a lot of positive feedback. People were really happy to, in a way, reconnect with their own memories, and also some people reconnected with each other through what I wrote. And the Dirty Stop-Outs Guide to 1970s Coventry came about because I'd already connected online with a writer and a publisher, Neil Anderson, and he'd set up, in a way, a franchise of books, the Dirty Stop-Out Guides. He'd written some about Sheffield and Chesterfield and other places. And he said, would I be interested in writing one of those about Coventry? This was about 5 years ago. In fact, it was 5 years ago, because that's when I started to do the research for this particular book. So I sort of jumped at the chance, really, because it gave me the chance to, again, go back to my roots and to find out what was happening in that decade, of which I knew something about because I was experiencing it myself. But also the framework was there, because the Dirty Stop-Out guides do have a particular template, if you like. A certain amount of text, a certain amount of scholarly work, but mostly people's memories, funny stories, anecdotes, and also sometimes not so funny stories about what was going on in the decade, and lots of visuals if possible. So I had that guide to follow from the books that Neil had written, and I thought, right, here we go, I'm going to do one. And that started the journey, really, which has been quite an exciting one, and is still going on, really, in the sense people still contact me about their memories and their experiences.
They're still contacting you today. The book came out
Yes,
5 years ago.
Well, that's right. I set up a Facebook group, and that continued, because once I'd done the 70s book, I felt compelled to do the next decade and was encouraged to do the next decade. And many of the people who contributed to the 70s book were really keen to talk about the 1980s as well. And that Facebook group sort of grew, but there was a core, a hardened core, let's put it like that, of people who were very willing and had some great stories to tell, and very supportive, absolutely supportive of what I was doing. So that has carried on, and they've brought other people on board. And there's still people joining that Facebook group as well.
Does the book contain any of your own personal experiences?
Yes and no. When I started writing it, well, before I started writing, I just brainstormed. I used my own experiences, my own memories, and brainstormed what was going on in Coventry in the 1970s. Some of the big venues came to mind, first of all, like the Locarno and a lot of the pubs, like the one I used to go to in my teens, the Market Tavern, and many others, Silver Sword, etc. So I was sort of brainstorming, writing things down about where I used to go, what I was familiar with, where my family, my older brothers and sisters used to go, and my friends used to go. And so that was part of, I suppose, my own memories and my own experiences. And then also I widened that out to think about not just the nightlife, but the day life, if you like. The cafes and the shops. Obviously, shopping has to be in there, and also the market, Coventry Market. I was a market girl, Saturdays and holidays, always down at Tony Batch's stall selling the fruit and veg. And then, there's lots of things, so many things came to mind. I thought, gosh, how am I going to fit it all in? But it doesn't contain any actual memories and personal experiences. Maybe one or two I've snuck in, but it really is about other people's. It's not an autobiography. It's based upon what I knew, but there were loads of places in Coventry I'd never been to. When you grow up in a certain area, like I did in Canley, that part of town, and the city centre. And I sometimes did venture into other suburbs and go to other places. I probably went as far as field as the Plough, down on the London Road. But, you don't know all the cities. Coventry's quite big, and there were so many other places. So Yeah, I needed lots of other people's stories. So it wasn't about me, it was about the ordinary people of Coventry who were going about living their lives, what they were doing in their spare time, but based on some of what I knew. But no, I hardly put any of my own memories in. There's just one or two that have snuck in there, I think, but that's about it.
There's a quote in the book by Trevor Teasdale that there was a feeling that nothing ever happens. And I felt the same, and we were wrong, as your book clearly shows.
Yeah, I think we all had that feeling. I'm sure kids do today. But yeah, possibly there's more going on than meets the eye now. But yeah, you did have that feeling that, well, where are you going to go? There's nowhere to go to. You go to town and you go to the same places. There was a lot going on, just with the pubs and the venues to see live music or to go to discos. You know, like Locarno always had stuff going on, and many people like myself used Locarno even, before they were 15. We used to go then we were about 12 to the Saturday morning discos. So there was something going on for most age groups, really. And also the working men's clubs. I did sneak in a chapter on working men's clubs across Coventry in that book. It had to be there because, every weekend thousands of people were rocking up to the clubs for live entertainment, concerts, and most nights of the week people were there. So there was all that going on. Plus, there was that creativity. And I knew that at some level myself, but I must admit, talking to people like Trev, who I'm going to flag up Trev here because he was really very helpful at the outset of my journey. Somebody put him in touch with me, and he shared so many great memories and links as well, which provided a lot of good information, visuals, a lot of authentic materials, as we call them, like flyers and posters, handwritten flyers, etc., which are absolutely great. So he was really extremely instrumental with this book. But he also reminded me and informed me a lot about all the creativity that was going on in terms of the music scene, and the poetry scene, and the fanzines, and the do-it-yourself handbills that went out, the information, the self-help groups that were going on during the 70s when, Coventry hit hard times, as many other cities did across the country. So there was all that, and I think I learned a lot in researching this book from people like Trev and others about that creativity. So, often, obviously, two-tone specials get flagged up as being a new music movement, and that went global, so to speak. But there was a lot of other things going on right across the decade that, again, is not often written about, not often documented. And I was glad to be able to put some of that into this book.
Trev's quote made me think, and I do recall used to meet up in town most weekends with mates, like many young people did, and spend the night on a perpetual pub crawl. So if you're just drinking all night, then yeah, nothing ever happens.
Yeah. And of course, you can't remember the next day because you've got a hangover and it's all blurred, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I remember the live music scene in the early 70s. It was great. I was in a number of bands, and there were plenty of venues that supported live music. But by the end of the decade, many of those venues had closed, and Coventry was in a cultural and industrial decline.
Well, the decline, yes, industrial decline. I mean, that's a big reason to stop a lot of things happening, isn't it, really? Yeah, Coventry wasn't the only place affected by changes in manufacturing industries. We were losing rapidly the car industry, which supported so many families and obviously supported a lot of the nightlife and the daytime life, the cafes, the shops, and so on. There was less money around. People could go out less. If they did go out, they spent less. So many of the venues did start to go into decline. I do think there was still quite a lot of creativity and things happening at, let's say, the do-it-yourself level, where people were producing stuff and organising events, which might cost nothing or were very cheap. But the larger scale of things, venues started to close down. They weren't viable anymore. And so I think mainly the economic, the industrial decline that hit the city, which was summed up very well, wasn't it, in the Specials hit tune, Ghost Town, was there. It was, there wasn't too much money around. You couldn't do that much. And especially if the venues you were used to going to had closed down. And I think also at the same time, because people were perhaps having to stay home a bit more, there were more home-based entertainments coming along. You got the rise of the video, things like that. So, and of course, more TV channels. People started to stay home more, watch more TV, perhaps, rather than go out. I mean, a lot of working class men in the city would go to the working men's club, their local one, every night of the week and twice at weekends, but that wasn't sustainable anymore, so they stayed at home more. So, a lot of the clubs started to go into decline as well because fewer people were going, less frequently and were spending less money when they were there. So it sort of goes round in a circle. And the more people were staying at home, the more things they were finding to do. So perhaps social life became a little bit more home-based as well. And I think some of the big venues like the Coventry Theatre, that was great for live music, wasn't it? And people, more and more people would have to travel if you wanted to see the big bands. They'd go to Birmingham. And Birmingham's not that far away, but sometimes when you live in Coventry, Birmingham could seem like another country. It's just not so convenient, is it? So that sort of thing was happening as well. I think it's many factors, but the manufacturing industrial decline certainly was a major factor.
I have a copy of the book with me. It's only 84 pages long, but it's full of facts, pictures and anecdotes. How long did it take you to research the book?
Well, I did it in, I guess, a few months. How I did it, I don't know. I think I probably never left my laptop or the Coventry Archives. And yeah, heads up, thanks to the people in the Coventry Archives at the Herbert Gallery for assisting me going through lots of back copies of newspapers on the microfiche there. I think I had a deadline. I wanted to stick to it. I did have a job at that point, but when I wasn't in the job, I was doing this. You get pretty involved when you're researching for something and you're writing something, and especially when you've got a deadline. We wanted to get it out as soon as possible. But I must admit, once I got into it, it went on. It became easier. It was very busy, but I found out about the archives. There was lots of information there. Setting up that Facebook group was great because a few people came along and they brought other people along. So I was getting an awful lot of good memories, stories, and facts and figures through that, as well as visuals. Visuals were a problem because in the 70s people didn't really take pictures. They didn't have cameras, or if they did have a camera, they wouldn't think to take them out on a Saturday or Friday night out and take pictures. So that was harder. But on the whole, it probably took, 4 months. And, right to the last minute, I was collecting memories. So I put the first draft together and then had a bit of time to put in any late things that came along, any interesting stories or any more visuals. So it was fairly quick, but, I was very dedicated to it because I was absolutely involved in it and I loved it. I loved doing it. I really did. I loved chatting to people every day. I'd put my laptop on, open up the Facebook group, see who was there. I'd put something up, say, hello, everybody, what are you doing today? Do you remember this? Do you remember that? And bump, off we went on these great conversations. And, it was fun as well as work. Mostly fun.
What reaction has the book received since it was published?
Very good feedback, actually. Most people have, especially the people who contributed to it, are very pleased with it. And I mean, that's always important to me, that I get it right for the people who are in it. That's why I've always checked and double checked that everything I'm going to put in, they're okay with it. I never change anything anybody says, unless it's got too many swear words in it, in which case I do have to censor. But on the whole, the main thing is to get it right for them, what they've shared with me. So they were all very, very positive, and many of them were glad to be in the book and glad to have their stories in there. And many people who were contributors who were in the book actually says, well, I didn't think my life or my own stories were interesting. I'm just an ordinary person. I can't believe that somebody would find it interesting reading this. And again, that's quite sad when people think that, but that's probably the way we're brought up, isn't it? That you live your life, you're an ordinary life. It's not important. It's the lives of the rich and celebrities and the famous people that are interesting. Well, no, ordinary people are. And, I think that voice of the ordinary people comes across. And yeah, on the whole, very good. And I got some good reviews. I was very happy. I got a very positive review from Pete Chambers, the Coventry Music Museum, because he was very supportive and he helped quite a lot with some information and some pictures as well. So thanks to him. And I thought, well, if I get a good review from Pete, then yeah, sorted. So on the whole, very good.
1970s Coventry comes across as a culturally vibrant city. How do you see Coventry in the 21st century?
Well, I have to be honest and say I'm getting on a bit in life now, and maybe there's a tendency that when you get older, you look back to your own younger decades and think things were much better. We did a lot more, there was a lot more going on. The city was more vibrant, even though we thought at the time there wasn't much going on. So I have to, be wary of putting the rose tinted spectacles on. There were struggles, there were economic difficulties, there were hard times. But I think the big difference today, and I think it's not just Coventry, if you think about the life of, particularly the leisure life, the leisure time activities of people across the country, it's different now. And it's less, let's say, self-made, what I call do it yourself. A lot of it was do it yourself, a lot of it was spontaneous. I think our lives now are more in a way controlled by the system, if you like. Particularly people have got their phones and maybe don't spend their time so spontaneously. Yeah, I think now that Coventry, like many other places, it's a lot of the venues are to do with food, which is never a problem. We used to like to go out to eat, but it might have been a bag of chips or a one all in at the Parson's Nose at the end of the night. But I think now a lot of leisure time does revolve around people going to restaurants and cafes or coffees, doesn't it? And that's fine, but there doesn't seem to be so much in the way of going to pubs where there might be live music, for example. I know there still are some in Coventry, and also some of the clubs still provide that, but there are far fewer venues. So there's a lot more to do with going out for a meal and having a few drinks in a restaurant rather than going to a pub. And, in a way, we might become a bit more insulated, because if you go out with a few friends or with your family, you sit in a restaurant, you perhaps don't really interact with other people, whereas if you're going into a crowded pub, you are interacting more, perhaps socialising a bit more. So, looking at Coventry now, I see lots and lots of restaurants where there used to be maybe not so many, but there's not so many other things going on, like like the live music and things like that. There is a lot of vibrancy coming from some of the different communities, and that's been encouraged, I know, by the authorities, particularly for the Year of Culture. But I wonder to what extent younger people get themselves together to organise something, and also we had to plan ahead, and yet we could still be spontaneous on the night, like meet you underneath the elephant and see where it goes. I think these days it's more everybody's on their phone, and I'm not the first person to complain about people being on their phones all the time, am I? But possibly too much life is lived on the phones, online, and not actually here and now enjoying what's around. So, yeah, things have changed. For me, yeah, I can see less vibrancy in some areas, and it's more about having a night out at a restaurant rather than anything else these days.
Do you have any advice for aspiring authors of non-fiction who are interested in following in your footsteps?
I do. I think, first of all, good on you if you want to write something non-fiction, particularly if it's about your hometown or something you know about popular culture. But I think you really have to decide or think about, at least, why do you want to write about it? Because we all have a passion for something. We think, oh, yes, I'm going to write about that. And that's fine. But why do you want to write? Is it just for you, or is it what you want to get published? And you're saying for aspiring publishers, so people think, yeah, I want to get it published. So you have to think then, well, will people be interested? Who am I writing this for, apart from myself? Who will be the audience? Who might be the people who are going to buy it? Because it does come down to that. You want people to buy it, and you want people to enjoy it. I won't say it's about making lots of money either. If people think I'm going to write this book and I'm going to make lots of money, I think those ideas should be pushed to one side, because unless you write something like a J.K. Rowling Harry Potter type book, you'll probably make a net loss writing non-fiction books. There has to be a bit of a labour of love there, but you can try and cover your costs for sure. But it is a labour of love a lot of the time, so you've got to be prepared to put a lot of time into it, a lot of energy, and to be really self-motivated, particularly if you are working and you're going to be doing this in your spare time, as I did. You have to find that time really. But do think about who is your audience. You've got to gear it to that audience. Is it a younger audience, or is it an older audience? Any particular group of people? And you've got to almost gear what you say and how you say it to particular audiences. And you do need to think that there is an audience out there. People will be interested in it, and will buy it and enjoy it. And you can share the love in that sense. So that's some advice: to be realistic about why and how, and also the how. How are you going to get your information? How are you going to do your research? With me, I did it partly through archives, through reading existing books and materials written about Coventry already. A lot of it I did, online, interacting with my Facebook people, and sometimes offline, actually meeting them for real, which is always good, and talking to them. So how are you going to get your information? What sort of information? And is it going to contain visuals? I was lucky with this template that I've got handed by Neil, that the visuals are going to go in there. But if you're writing a book which is mostly text and you've only got a few visuals, even a few visuals can cost quite a lot of money when you're publishing it. So you've got to think about the cost as well, and think about how much you could afford to put into it in terms of your own, I guess your line in the sand type of thing. So lots of considerations, but that's not to deter people. I would really encourage people to write more about popular culture, local popular culture and history, because it's important. And obviously as time progresses and people fade away, older people fade away, we're not going to know those stories. So I would encourage people, but be realistic about what you can achieve and who you're writing for.
Your other books in the trilogy are A Guide to 80s Coventry and A Guide to Working Men's Clubs of Coventry. Where can people find those books?
Well, they should all be in Waterstones in Coventry, in the city centre, which is, I'm sure most people know where that is. And of course, it's right next to what used to be the Locarno, isn't it? Which is now the Central Library. So, yeah, copies are available there to buy. I think there will be some copies actually in the library if you wanted to borrow it. I know they did buy some. And also even in the archives, because they've got a small library there if you wanted to have a look at it while sitting in the archives. So, yeah, there's options there to buy as well as to loan. Of course, the online channels. The publisher is called ACM Retro. You can buy directly from them. And if you're going to buy online, I would say that's the preferable way to do it, ACM Retro, because that's a small company. It needs supporting because it gets these sort of books out there. But if you're an Amazon fan, then you can get it on Amazon as well.
Right. What plans do you have for the rest of the year?
Yes, well, I do have plans to write a fifth anniversary edition of the 1970s book, because late last year, Neil, the publisher, reminded me that it'll be 5 years this year, which I couldn't believe, but there we are. So he's encouraging me, and I think it's a good idea to do an anniversary edition, which will mean I'd like some more memories and some more stories. It's not going to be a completely new book, but it will build on the existing 1970s book. So, I'll put a little appeal here for any memories and stories, any pictures of the 1970s. If you haven't contributed to any of the other books, but you feel like doing so now, then do feel free to contact me. I have that 1970s Facebook group, which you can probably find quite easily and join. So yeah, that's the plan. I've had a few discussions with a few people about that, and I'm going to start getting going on that fairly soon and putting things together. So stories, memories, pictures for that book, and it's say not just about music and nightlife. It's about the cafes and restaurants. It's about the shops. It's about the Coventry market. I'm a big fan of Coventry Market, you might have guessed. And and even the local shopping areas in Coventry, shops that people liked, and that sort of stuff. Lots going on. Lots I didn't manage to get first time round. So maybe I can capture a little bit more for the 5th anniversary edition.
Right. Ruth, I enjoyed reading your book. It was entertaining and it triggered a lot of memories that made me smile. Thanks for being my guest. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much, Ray. I've really enjoyed being your guest.
In this episode, the spotlight is on a Locarno in Smithford Way, Coventry, later called Tiffany's, and fondly remembered by many as the Rockhouse. It opened in 1960 and in just a few years became a major venue for many top acts, including The Jam, Blondie, Chuck Berry and Led Zeppelin. I was there on the night Zeppelin played. It was the 9th of December 1971. The place was packed. Robert Plant asked all those on the dance floor, which included me, to sit down, so everyone could see the band, and we did. Seeing Led Zeppelin perform up close and personal is something I'll always remember. That and the bomb scare, a false alarm meant to disrupt a great night enjoyed by all. But the dim memories that make me go all warm and fuzzy are when myself and my future bandmates dressed in suits would dance and holler to Geno Washington and Ram Jam Band, Jimmy James and the Vagabonds, and Coventry's own Ray King Soul Band. It was always a great night when either of those bands performed. The passion and energy would make the whole dance floor bounce with sheer excitement. The Specials had the same effect when they played there in November '79. They even wrote a song about the place, Friday Night, Saturday Morning. But by 1981, 21 years after opening, it was all over, and Coventry lost a major music venue that it took to its heart. Today it's been replaced by the Central Library, a Grade 2 listed building. The all-glass atrium that was the entrance in the precinct disappeared long ago. If you go to the Central Library today, you'll recognise a little of where it used to be. I'd like to say that if you listen carefully as you make your way through the library, you just might hear echoes of its past, faint music vibrations of all those bands, the boys and girls dancing, enjoying the music. But you can't. The old dance floor is now full of books and virtually silent, and that is such a shame. Coming up is a demo of one of my songs titled Times of Our Lives. It was recorded at Horizon Studios in 1979 with Roger Strong on drums, Pat Miller main vocal and backing vocals, Tim Constable keyboards and backing vocals, Brian Barrie guitar and myself on bass. I believe there must be many songs that have hardly ever been played in public. So if you have any demos of you or your band in MP3 format, send them to audiowavecafe@gmail.com, together with where they were recorded and who played what, and I'll see about getting them played on a podcast. machines. Hey girl, remember those times and the songs I used to know. They were the times of our lives. Only then we didn't know, but just cared about our friends. Hope those days would never end. Whatever became Johnny B. Good, oh Carol, well I knew they would keep coming back again together, smile to my eyes. They were the times of our lives. Only then we didn't know, but just cared about our friends. Hope those days would never end. Well, we moved so fast, we couldn't last. Spending time just has to stop. Now and again I recall those days and the friends I used to know. They were the times of our lives. Only then we didn't know, but just cared about our friends. Hope those days would never end. 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 Well, that's about it for this episode. Many thanks to my guest, Ruth Cherrington. Do check out her Dirty Stophouse trilogy of books, A Guide to 1970s Coventry, 1980s Coventry, and Coventry's working men's clubs. In episode 3, my guest will be Rhys Scott of alternative rock band Never Apart, and I'll be talking about his Your Music website, Gathering Dust. I'll also be shining a spotlight on the Lanch, Coventry's much missed live music venue. That's it. I'm done. Till next time.